The supermarket was alive with its usual late afternoon rhythm, carts squeaking down crowded aisles, the intercom buzzing with price checks, fluorescent lights casting their tired glow. At the far end of the store, Darnell Brooks pushed his mop along the polished tile floor, his movements steady, precise. He had worked here for years, keeping the store clean long after the managers and cashiers went home. He wore his navy blue janitor's uniform like a badge of pride, a reminder that honest work, no matter how humble, carried dignity. But dignity was a fragile thing in the wrong hands. Hey! The sharp bark of a voice cut across the produce section. Heads turned as Mr. Clarkson, the store manager, stormed forward, his face flushed red. He jabbed a finger toward Darnell. What do you think you're doing? Darnell paused, resting both hands on the mop handle. Just working, sir. Cleaning the floor like always. Clarkson's eyes narrowed, his voice loud enough to draw stares from customers gathering near. Don't play dumb with me. I saw you sneaking around the stockroom earlier. Something's missing, and I think we all know who took it. The air in the supermarket seemed to thicken. Shoppers slowed their carts, whispering. A young cashier at Register 3 froze mid-scan, eyes wide. Darnell stood taller, though his heart pounded in his chest. Sir, with respect, I haven't stolen anything. You've got it wrong. But Clarkson's voice only grew sharper, carrying over the aisles. Wrong. Number. I know your type. Always lurking. Always looking for something to pocket. Do you think wearing that uniform makes you invisible? Well, not to me. The sting of humiliation was sharper than the accusation itself. Darnell felt dozens of eyes on him, strangers measuring him against the ugly words spilling from his boss's mouth. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm, to hold on to the quiet dignity that had carried him through tougher moments than this. I haven't taken anything, he said again, his voice steady but low. Clarkson smirked, turning to the crowd as if to gather a jury. You see? Won't even defend himself properly. Guilty as sin. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Doubt in some faces, discomfort in others. But no one spoke up. Not yet. And so, Darnell stood alone, mop in hand, accused of a crime he didn't commit. He knew the truth. The cameras knew the truth. But for now, the shame was his to bear, heavy and unfair, beneath the unblinking glare of the store's fluorescent lights. The produce section had gone silent except for the distant hum of the freezers. Darnell stood gripping the handle of his mop, every muscle in his body urging him to speak, to fight back. But years of swallowing disrespect kept his voice calm. Clarkson, sensing the power of the moment, pressed harder. He paced in front of Darnell like a prosecutor in a courtroom. You think I don't see you wandering back and forth between aisles? Looking over your shoulder? You think I don't notice how long you stay in the stockroom? His voice rose with each word. I've run this store for 20 years, and I know a thief when I see one. A few customers gasped. Others just shook their heads, torn between disbelief and unease. A child clutched his mother's sleeve and whispered, Did he really steal? The mother hushed him but kept staring, uncertain. Darnell swallowed hard. His voice, when it came, was low but steady. I'm not a thief. I'm here to do my job, the same way I do every day. Clarkson laughed bitterly, turning so everyone could hear. Your job? Sweeping floors? Emptying trash cans? Don't pretend that makes you honest. People like you can't be trusted. The words hit like blows. People like you. It wasn't just an accusation anymore. It was an insult to everything Darnell was, to every hour he'd worked with quiet pride. At the registers, a few cashiers looked down at their belts of groceries, pretending not to hear, but the shame on their faces betrayed them. An older stock clerk shifted uncomfortably, opening his mouth as if to speak, then closing it again. No one wanted to risk Clarkson's wrath. Clarkson leaned closer, his tone dripping with mockery. Go ahead, empty your pockets if you're so innocent. Show everyone here that you're not hiding anything. Darnell's cheeks burned. He wanted to shout, to slam his fist against the cart rail, to remind Clarkson that he'd worked here longer than some of the managers. But instead, he straightened his back, his hands steady at his sides. "I don't have to prove myself to you in front of all these people," he said quietly. "The cameras will tell the truth." The crowd murmured at that. A few nodded, their doubts shifting. Clarkson's smile faltered, but he forced it back quickly. "Cameras?" he sneered. "I don't need cameras. I can see guilt plain as day." He raised his voice again, gesturing at the customers as though they were a jury. "Look at him. Look at his silence. That's the face of someone who's been caught." The humiliation settled heavier, the shame almost unbearable. And yet, deep inside, Darnell clung to one thought, the only anchor he had in that storm of false accusations. The truth will come out. And when it does, it won't be me standing here ashamed. Darnell stood his ground, the mop still upright like a staff in his hand. His face burned, but his voice remained calm. "I won't empty my pockets for a spectacle," he said. "You want proof? Let's check the cameras." The words hung in the air like a challenge. A ripple went through the crowd. Some customers nodded in agreement, their whispers rising. "Yeah, check the cameras." Why hasn't he done that already? Clarkson's jaw tightened. His confidence wavered for a split second, but then he scoffed, puffing out his chest. "I don't need cameras. My eyes are enough." "You think you can outsmart me? I've run this store longer than you've been sweeping it?" Darnell's voice grew firmer. "Then you shouldn't be afraid of the truth." The assistant manager, a younger woman named Rivera, stepped forward cautiously. Her voice was soft, but carried weight in the tense silence. "Sir, the cameras are always rolling. It would settle this quickly. Why don't we check?" Clarkson turned on her, his face flushing deeper. "Are you questioning me?" Rivera didn't flinch. "I'm saying we have the tools to confirm what happened. If Mr. Brooks says he's innocent, it's only fair to verify it." The cashiers exchanged nervous glances. A few of them nodded in agreement. Customers murmured louder now, emboldened. The tide of opinion was shifting. Clarkson's glare returned to Darnell. "You think you're clever, don't you? Hiding behind cameras, behind sympathy." "Fine." He jabbed a finger toward the office at the back of the store. "We'll check. And when we see what you did, don't expect to walk back in here again." Darnell simply nodded. "That's all I ask." The crowd parted as Clarkson stormed toward the office, Rivera close behind. Darnell followed, his steps steady, though inside his chest his heart pounded like a drum. Not because he feared the footage, but because he knew what it would reveal. The whispers swelled as the trio disappeared into the office. Some customers leaned over their carts to watch the door, their curiosity now burning hotter than doubt. And in that electric silence, the balance of power began to shift. For the truth was waiting, captured in grainy black and white, ready to turn accusation into revelation. The manager's office was cramped, its walls lined with clipboards, safety posters, and a faint smell of burnt coffee. Clarkson shoved past the assistant manager and dropped into the swivel chair, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "We'll settle this right now," he muttered, sweat beading at his temple. Darnell stood quietly in the doorway, his mop still in hand like a symbol of the dignity he refused to put down. Rivera leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes flicking between the two men. The monitor blinked to life. Clarkson pulled up the security footage, fast-forwarding through the grainy black and white clips. His lips curled in anticipation, eager for the moment he thought would prove him right. "See? There you are," he said, freezing the frame where Darnell entered the stockroom earlier that afternoon. "Sneaking around?" "Play it," Darnell said calmly. Clarkson hit the spacebar. The footage rolled. Darnell appeared again, but not alone. A teenage boy shuffled into frame, glancing around nervously, slipping a few cans into his backpack. Clarkson smirked. "There! A thief. And you just let him—" But the next second silenced him. On the screen, Darnell stepped forward, catching the boy by the arm. The boy froze, panicked. Instead of calling security, Darnell guided him gently toward the register. The footage showed him pulling cash from his own pocket, handing it discreetly to the cashier. and placing the items back on the counter. The boy left with groceries, not stolen, but paid for. The room went still. Rivera's lips parted, her eyes softening as the truth sank in. Darnell finally spoke, his voice steady but low. That boy's been in here before. Hungry. Alone. I wasn't going to let him steal, but I wasn't going to let him go without food either. So I covered it. That's all you saw. Clarkson's face flushed crimson. He fumbled with the mouse, rewinding, replaying, desperate to twist what everyone had just seen. But the truth was undeniable, playing out in loop after loop on the grainy screen. Rivera turned, her voice firm. Sir, that isn't theft. That's compassion. And you accused him, loudly, in front of half the store. Outside the office, the muffled sound of murmurs grew louder. Word was spreading. Employees and customers pressed closer to the door, some already whispering what they had heard. Clarkson swallowed hard, but his authority was crumbling piece by piece under the weight of the footage. Darnell didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just stood taller, the truth wrapping around him like armor. The cameras hadn't just cleared his name. They had revealed his heart. The office door creaked open and the crowd that had gathered outside leaned in, waiting for answers. Rivera stepped out first, her face composed, but her eyes flashing with something Clarkson didn't want to see. Certainty. Behind her, Darnell emerged, his uniform still marked with streaks of mop water, his shoulders straight. Clarkson trailed last, pale and stiff, his earlier bravado stripped away. What did it say? A woman asked, clutching her grocery basket tightly. Rivera didn't hesitate. The cameras showed the truth. Mr. Brooks didn't steal anything. In fact, he stopped someone else from stealing and paid out of his own pocket so that a hungry boy could take home food. The words rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Customers gasped. Employees whispered, their eyes wide. One cashier whispered to another, "He used his own money." For someone else's kid? At the back, a woman pressed forward, her face wet with tears. That boy, that was my son. Her voice cracked as she looked at Darnell. I didn't know how we'd get through this week. You didn't have to do that. Thank you. Thank you, the crowd murmured in awe. Eyes now fixed not on Clarkson, but on Darnell, the man who had been accused and humiliated minutes before. Clarkson tried to interject, his voice faltering. That's not the point. But no one listened. An older gentleman shook his head, his voice sharp. The point is, you dragged a good man through the mud in front of all of us. A younger employee folded her arms, and we all saw it. We all heard what you said. The murmurs swelled into a chorus of agreement. People nodded, some clapping Darnell on the back, others reaching out to shake his hand. Darnell didn't bask in it. He simply nodded humbly, his voice quiet. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted to do what was right. The woman with tears in her eyes stepped closer. Maybe. But you showed us what a hero looks like. And for the first time, the word hero rang louder in the supermarket than the word thief. The murmurs of the crowd rose into a steady hum of outrage. Customers clutched their carts, employees leaned against registers, and all eyes fixed on Clarkson. His face was blotchy red, his jaw tight, but the mask of authority he always wore was slipping fast. Clarkson raised his hands, forcing a brittle laugh. All right. Maybe I overreacted. Let's not blow this out of proportion. These things happen, but the crowd wasn't buying it. These things, one shopper snapped, her voice sharp, you humiliated him in front of the whole store. Yeah, added a stock clerk who'd kept quiet until now. This isn't the first time either. You always talk down to people like him, always looking for someone to blame. Heads nodded all around. Employees who had once bitten their tongues now found their voices. Rivera stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. Sir, with all due respect, what we saw today was unacceptable. You didn't just accuse Mr. Brooks. You mocked him. You humiliated him. And you did it without evidence. Clarkson's smile cracked, his eyes darting nervously. I was just trying to protect the store's property. But another voice cut in, deeper, more commanding. At the expense of your people? The district supervisor had arrived, drawn by the commotion. A tall man in a sharp suit, he stepped into the circle forming around Clarkson. His expression was stony as he looked between the shaken manager and the calm, dignified janitor who had endured the storm. I heard enough from outside the office, the supervisor said. Mister, Brooks acted with integrity. You, on the other hand, acted with prejudice and arrogance. The weight of the words silenced the crowd. Clarkson stammered, Sir, Save it, the supervisor interrupted. I'll be filing a report with HR tonight. For now, hand over your keys. The command was blunt, undeniable. Gasps rippled through the employees. Clarkson's eyes went wide, his mouth opening in protest, but the supervisor's glare cut him down. With trembling fingers, Clarkson pulled the keys from his pocket and set them on the counter. The sound of metal clinking against the laminate rang like a gavel in the room. The crowd erupted in murmurs of relief, even a few cheers. Clarkson, once the untouchable figure of authority, now stood small, exposed, his arrogance scattered like dust underfoot. And beside him, Darnell remained quiet, his posture calm, his dignity unshaken. The truth had spoken, and it had spoken louder than power. The supermarket was buzzing, not with transactions or price checks, but with something far heavier, the collective release of truth. Clarkson slunk away toward the exit, his head bowed, the keys he'd surrendered still glinting on the counter. No one stopped him. No one spoke to him. His authority had vanished the moment the cameras revealed the truth. All attention turned to Darnell. He stood quietly beside his mop bucket, the same place where the accusations had begun. But now, instead of suspicion, he was surrounded by gratitude. Customers reached out, shaking his hand. One man clapped him on the shoulder. You kept your cool, brother. That's real strength. The woman whose son had been caught on camera approached again, her face still wet with tears. She pulled her boy forward, the teen's head hanging low in shame. Go on, she whispered. The boy looked up at Darnell, his voice small. Thank you, sir, for helping me, for not letting me get in trouble. Darnell's expression softened. He knelt so his eyes were level with the boy's. Remember this, he said gently. Taking what isn't yours won't fix hunger, but asking for help just might. Don't let pride cost you your future. The boy nodded hard, his eyes filling. His mother gripped Darnell's hand, whispering, God bless you. Employees who had once stayed silent now stepped forward, standing beside him. One of the cashiers, a young woman who had seen him every shift, spoke up with conviction. You're more than a janitor here. You're the heart of this place. The district supervisor raised his voice so everyone could hear. Let it be clear. Mr. Brooks is an example of integrity and compassion. This store is lucky to have him. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling until it filled the aisles. Customers clapped, some even cheering. For the first time that day, Darnell felt the heavy shame in his chest replaced with something lighter. He bowed his head humbly, his voice carrying over the crowd. I didn't do anything special. I just did what was right. But in that moment, every face turned toward him knew the truth. He had done something very special indeed. Because in a world quick to accuse, Darnell had shown what it meant to act with quiet courage, steady dignity, and unshakable compassion. And the man once labeled a thief walked out of the spotlight as what he had always been, a hero.